industrial revolution, it was powered by the steam engine. And the second industrial revolution is the internal combustion engine in the power plants. And then you get to the third industrial revolution, and that's your microprocessor. And now here we are today going, okay, what's next and how do we make sense of all of that? You know, and you think of a few key industries. We've talked about fintech, and you think of some of the complex issues around... Oh, okay, that was not me. You know, three industries in particular that are really being disrupted right now. Manufacturing, health, financial services. You know, it's not just the industry themselves, but it's all the legal issues that come with that. At Microsoft, we are very focused on privacy and cybersecurity, and thanks to those of you in the UK, we have GDPR now, and having to snap to those. And now our president wants to push the US government to employ something similar. So it's just always changing and evolving, and keeping up with that and understanding all the legal implications that come with that. I think for lawyers today, my sister's an attorney who graduated 10 years ago, and we never talked about technology. You didn't hear about that in law school. And now today you're actually hearing more about that. They're teaching more about operations and technology solutions. I think that's really an important skill set evolution for attorneys and paralegals. I see a world where paralegals are more project managers, and attorneys do have this technical aptitude, and they're understanding not only the technology, but all those legal ramifications that go with that. So some of the technologies in particular that are most disruptive right now, obviously, and James has talked to some of these, the cognitive services, machine learning and AI. We sort of chuckle at Microsoft. Everyone was, oh, can you just plug in AI? Okay, there's a whole model training aspect of that I think people forget with the new shiny object in AI that makes it so complicated. Big data and analytics, as we like to say, data is the new oil, or as I like to say, data is the new bacon, because bacon makes everything better. But you know, it's not just the input, but really the value of what you get is that output. You know, what is your information? What data do I have? What story can it tell me? How can I move faster? And then now we have technology at the edge, and Internet of Things, and toasters that tell you temperature, and coffee cups that I just want my toast. I don't need that. But it's, you know, those complications as well. And when you look at all these technologies, and again, I work for Microsoft, the proud makers of Azure Cloud, you know, that involves data centers, and understanding where your data is being protected. And, you know, we offer a lot of solutions in the hybrid cloud. And I think, where's my friend Rezvan? There he is over there. If you want to see one of the most complex yet amazing structures in a law firm technology, CMS, what they've done in hybrid cloud is outstanding. But at Microsoft, we have over 54 data centers worldwide. So that obviously enables more hybrid cloud solutions. In addition, it's obviously, when you're thinking of cloud, and when I'm out speaking, a lot of what I still hear is this fear of the cloud, or how protected is the cloud. And so when you consider your cloud provider, obviously the certifications, and Microsoft is very proud to be the trusted cloud provider for the US government as well. Also, some of the things that we hear from our customers at Microsoft who are developing technology is this concern about developing technology in the cloud and potentially being sued, especially by non-practicing entities. So something that Microsoft implements with an Azure customer is that you have access to 10,000 patents. So if you are basically sued for developing in the cloud, you can purchase one of these patents and use that to defend yourself. And that now includes AI and Internet of Things patents. So moving specifically to Microsoft for a moment, and all of the legal groups, everyone is going through the same transformation that I am. We are constantly being pushed for smart contracting, robotic process automation. So looking at our global contracting office, they've employed CRM with Azure Cloud Analytics. Our litigation group, we continue to expand our capabilities in O365 around document search. Our entire CELA employee web is now hosted on the Azure, it's an Azure portal. Our US immigration has moved everything to dynamic CRM. And then within the patent group, myself, we have taken all of our on-prem solutions and pushed everything into one end-to-end solution in the cloud, where we've then layered Power BI analytics on top of that. So I'll talk about those. Oh, it didn't come up. My apologies. So talking in particular about the intellectual property group. So whether you're in patents or in any industry, I think these are all similar pains. The problems we were facing were, number one, we had a very outdated system hosted on-prem, heavy IT costs, integrations into different reporting systems, just a lot of complexity to manage. Because these systems were disjointed, we had 5 different systems. Marrying that data together and getting any good output was very difficult. We also, because it was an on-prem hosted solution, we had a lot of security concerns. We had to give network access, building access. And when I started at Microsoft, our IP management system had over 280 people with administrative rights. That should be no more than 2. So there was a lot there that we needed to tighten up around security and privacy. We had some significant data integrity issues, and we were talking about building a business case and planning ahead for these types of things. For us, we had to basically spend a year validating all of our data in parallel with building our business case because of the significant data issues we had. And so, of course, with bad data comes bad reports. And our ability to just really get to rich data quickly, we were living in Excel. Yes, we make that product, but we did not want to live in that. And it would take us 2 weeks to put together any rich, comprehensive reports for leadership. And as you all know, 2 weeks is not a way to be agile in business. And lastly, when I started at Microsoft, every year we have a poll, MS poll, that goes out. And the only question that I have that gets served up to the president of the company is around tools and process. And our approval rating was 23%, and our disapproval rating was 77%. There was no neutral. A few people loved it, and everyone hated it. So that was a real significant challenge to convince people that, well, if we undergo this significant disruptive change, that this is going to make your life better. And that's where, again, as James pointed out, a strong business case, it involves more than just the numbers. You really do have to think about the people and the culture. And so we spent about 18 months in a planning phase, really diving deep. To James's point, we talked to a lot of our users. What do you need? Not what do I think you need because I'm in operations, but what do you really need? How do you want to do your work? And we took the opportunity not just to change the system, but to completely revamp our workflows and to really stop and think and starting at the what we want to accomplish phase. I think people tend to get stuck in, okay, I'm here and I need to be there, so how do I get from here to there? Personally, I think you figure out where you want to be and you map back to that so that you end up with the right output. And so where we ended up at the end of 4.5 years, by moving our whole solution to the cloud and having one end-to-end solution, we dropped our IT costs by 70%. Our efficiency measured by time and motion studies, measured by volume output, and how much more work we can serve up has gone up 30%. We have best-in-class security and privacy. We have very strong security profiles and capabilities to limit who can access what, GDPR, export control, and all of those factored in. Our data integrity level, we run about 180 different audit scripts every month to ensure the pristine quality of the data, and we're at 99.9%. We've employed Power BI, which I have another slide to show you, but Power BI is really what's revolutionized us. Our attorneys want an experience where they aren't living and having to deal in a system all the time. They want information served up easily. They want to be able to make decisions. They want to be able to move on. So really the richness for them is to be able to produce these output reports that tell them where all their cases are in the pipeline, who's doing what technology categories, who's delayed, who's not, outside counsel metrics. And every month we have push button metrics that feed all of this up to leadership as well. And lastly, our MS poll results just came out 3 weeks ago, and I'm pleased to say that we are up to an 81% approval rating, 14% neutral, and very few people are unhappy. And that is significant when we have 100% user adoption, both internally at Microsoft and all 700 of our outside counsel attorneys that use this system. So this was our ecosystem in 2015. Like I said, we had multiple SharePoint sites, multiple tools, multiple integrations, and most people had 2 to 3 monitors on their desk to try and work in 2 to 3 places. Where we are now is a much more simplified ecosystem. We have a tool hosted in the cloud with BI analytics. It's a little bit oversimplified. We obviously have integrations into other Microsoft HR feed store and things like that, but overall it is a much simpler system to administer. And again, Power BI. So to me, this is the sexiest technology on earth, I have to say, because I love data and I love to be able to get to data fast. And so these are the type of dashboards that people, our leadership and our attorneys have that tell them exactly where their cases are, We have both engineers and attorneys that work together so they can slice and dice this data down to pipeline, regional coverage, time to filing, all kinds of metrics. And this has really helped us in the patent world. The time to file, especially in the technology world, is critical. We were taking on average 93 days from getting an idea to actually filing it. And in that 93 days, your competitors are out there doing the same things you are, and you really run that risk. We've been able to drop that to 44 days just by having visibility of where everything is in our system. And so really the key takeaways, digital transformation, it's happening. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid the cloud. But making smart decisions and where you want to be as a business and planning that out effectively is very important. Moving on-prem systems, I know there's data sovereignty and other legal issues that come into play, but moving to the cloud for us certainly saved us a tremendous amount of money. It's tough. I'm not going to say it wasn't the longest 4 years of my life, and I've been in legal almost 30 years. It was extremely tough, but extremely rewarding. And I think if you are yourself in an organization trying to undergo some significant changes, my personal advice is, number one, make sure you have your leadership support. If you don't have unwavering leadership support, people are going to waffle as you start down this path, and you really need to have them convicted in supporting what your mission statement is. And really listen to your users. Like I said, at the end of the day, something may make tremendous sense on paper and tremendous sense from a technology person selling it to you, but if your users won't use it, your data is no good, your process is no good, and your GCs are not getting the ROI that they think they invested in. And so with that, I can open up for any questions. No? Okay, so I will now introduce, excuse me, and everything here today. Carl Chapman, strategic advisor and founder of EY Riverview Law, and he's going to be hosting a panel for us on how to drive efficiency and run your in-house legal department like a business.
Good morning. Oh, we're going to have some fun. Good morning. What do you reckon? They need more bacon.
They need more bacon. Bacon makes everything better.
We've already had a great start because it's fascinating, James, the point you made about start from the problem and work backwards. Understand then how technology can solve that problem is exactly the way to start. We see a lot of people starting with technology rather than actually start with what problem we're trying to solve. So I think that was spot on. Melanie, the digitization challenge. Not just for departments, but also for individual lawyers and what that means in practice. Massive, massive impact. And for both of you, things which I think we all need to take away. User adoption is absolutely critical, and a relentless focus on the user experience is fundamental, because if you can't land it and it's used, you're going to get no ROI. But of course, all roads lead to the data, which is the point that you're both making. Before I introduce the panel, let's just do a quick framing for them. How many of you are from corporate legal departments? Please put your hands up. Okay. How many of you from law firms? How many from vendors? How many of you are based in the UK? Okay, and those of you based in the UK, how many of you are standing for the leadership of the Conservative Party? No? Oh, okay. Let me introduce the panel first. Melanie, I'm not going to introduce you. You've already been introduced, although from now on you're going to be known to me as Melanie Bacon Solves Every Problem, which I think is absolutely spot on. Let's go to our two other panellists. And Maurits, if I can ask you to introduce yourself first, please.
Yes, so I'm Maurits Annegaarn. I'm here on behalf of Wolfs Kluwer as segment manager for the corporate legal market. That means it's my job to understand as much as possible about corporate legal market, not just creating the products that you'll be using tomorrow or today, but also designing, looking at the rest of the market for the products of 3 years from now, whether it's to cover new legislation or new ways of working.
Great to have you here. Zev?
Yeah, I'm running a much smaller company than Wolfs Kluwer or Microsoft called Picama. It's a startup that builds the ecosystem that will power the intellectual property system of the future.
Okay, so our first question of the panel is actually about how to drive efficiency and run your in-house legal department like a business. And the question I'd like to ask the panel is, it's not just about efficiency, is it? It's also about value. I think most businesses talk about the value they bring to their customers. So in the context of it's as much about value as efficiency, and so we can frame the rest of the conversation, what's the future role of a corporate legal department in an organisation going forward? What does it look like? What does it need to focus on? Marit.
I think, first of all, today a lot of corporate legal departments have sort of separated themselves from the rest of the organization. As you said earlier in the conversation, they see themselves as internal counsel, but you don't talk about internal finance or internal tax. Yeah, you don't have that. So they really distinguish themselves as being outside of the organization, and they need to take that step to become more part of the organization, in a way to become a service center, creating value for the organization, being somewhere you can go for help instead of just another hurdle to take.
So that would pick up on a lot of the comments that Melanie made about the power of that data. The data slides were superb, because I can imagine as a stakeholder the insight that gives me into what's happening. Zev, what's your vision of the future for a corporate legal department?
Yeah, I see the corporate legal department as a driver of outcome, as opposed to what it is today. I think that lawyers feel in corporate legal departments feel that if the customer, which is the business unit, asks for a contract and they deliver the contract, then they've done their job. But the job is not to deliver the contract. The job is to actually get it signed. And there's typically frustration around the legal department being too rigid or insisting on things that customers are refusing to accept. So kind of accepting that the legal department is part of the entire organization, seeing the targets of the entire organization and working as part of it to deliver the outcomes of the organization. Being part of the whole team.
It's really interesting. One of the trends that we're seeing is this massive move from inputs to outputs to outcomes. So inputs, hours, outputs, a contract, outcomes. Actually, how do we make sure that we contract appropriately, that we don't leave revenue on the table, that the obligations are managed properly? So we're seeing a massive move in corporate legal departments to a focus on outcomes, which I think is really important. Melanie, in terms of you are a 4-year journey. And I think that's the other thing for people to recognise. This is not easy stuff. You have to work at it, but the benefits are material. But that was done in the context of a vision of the target operating model about where you wanted to get to. Mm-hmm. So your vision of the future of the corporate legal department?
Well, I think, they're both spot on. At Microsoft in particular, as our CEO likes to say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And Microsoft has a very deep culture. And so, honestly, one of my biggest frustrations at times is how we identify ourselves as, well, we have a separate culture. We're in legal. And I don't understand that. I feel like, it should be like anything, whether you're in legal or any other area. It's a partnership. And you're right. It's about ultimate. What did you provide? Giving the contract over but not getting it signed, that didn't give any value to the business. And we work with our practice services group quite a bit in trying to help them talk to their customers. I think this is true of human nature. I think the more that people can connect to the work, why is what I'm doing important to the bigger picture? I think there's a motivator there. And so the siloed mindset of, we're in-house legal, I feel the same way. In-house legal, outside legal, it should be a synergized team, and we should all be helping each other. We should be thinking about what is the true value we can bring to an organization. And that's an evolution of skill sets too. There's a lot of factors involved in that.
Well, it's interesting you pick up on the point on culture, because I think this gets to be probably a key ingredient into any successful transition, digitization program. The culture is absolutely fundamental, and I think it is fascinating that it's called in-house legal, because as we said, there's no in-house finance team or in-house sales team. I don't think anyone's ever seen anything like that. And if you look at it, legal is not an island. It's part of the complete end-to-end process. So in the context of a vision of the corporate legal department of the future, which you've articulated, if we're going to be asking lawyers to make that jump, they're going to have to ask to change. And change is hard for everybody. It's even harder for lawyers given the education and training infrastructure. What are the practical things that we can do to help them on that journey? You referenced leadership in a second, Melanie. I'm going to come back to that. But Zev, if I come to you first, what are the things we can do to help lawyers on this journey? Because they're incredibly bright people. I mean, this is an incredibly intelligent, bright bunch of people who logically will get it, but emotionally may find it quite hard. What do we do to take them on the journey?
Yeah, so tackling the cultural issue, there is it starts with honesty, or one could say dishonesty. So I do tech conferences as well. It's quite good fun to go to a tech conference and then to go to a legal conference. And in tech conference, it's all about talking about people's failures. People take pride in talking about what went wrong. I've done that, and then I did this company and it all went down, and then I've done this one and it went down as well, and it's okay. But then in legal, and it doesn't matter if it's in-house or outside counsel, I remember sitting in a panel with a patent attorney, and someone asked a question. It was a tech conference, and someone asked a question about describe a failure. And the first thing that comes to my mind is a patent attorney surely screwed up a deadline. He's going to talk about that, and he went whiter than what he already was, and he was Scottish. And he would say, well, sometimes clients give you instructions too late. And I was going at him, you've been a patent attorney for 25 years. Surely you've done something wrong at that time. And he was like, no. And there's a serious cultural problem, and in first admitting that you can make mistakes. And that's where it starts. So it has nothing to do with technology. It's just, looking at what we do and saying, okay, this is what we do right, this is what we do wrong. So it starts with education. Not being so afraid and uptight about what we do and questioning, can we do things in a different way? Then it goes to technology adoption. When we try. So the way to do technology adoption is to start with a piece of technology which won't work as we want it to, and then give feedback to whoever, whether it's internal or external developers, give feedback to developers to make it better until it gets to the point where it works as we want it to. One of our frustrating experiences trying to sell to lawyers is that they try to get it working in their head perfectly before they actually commit to it and commit to a process. And it's okay to an extent, because it's okay to see a risk, but there is going to be pain. So that's the other thing. I mean, accept that things are not going to work perfectly from day one, but that's the route, and I think this is kind of what you've just described, how you went through. And the way to grow is through committing to change, committing to trying new things, and then this is how you end up growing and doing new things. I think the other thing is that all companies in the world are going to sell software. This is how it's going to be. And if you're selling service and you don't get it, you don't understand it, in 20 years' time you're going to sell software, then now is the time to wake up and smell the roses. And all the companies in the world are going to sell software. A software plus service of sorts, but software is going to be key. And this is what's happening. So if you haven't figured out what the software that you're going to sell is yet, then try to start to think about it now, because the time is running out. So it's software plus service is the legal service of the future. I am blown away by why not every law firm builds software now. Because there is not going to be any competitive advantage anymore apart from building software. So these are the three my takeaways.
Well, you segue into an entire different conference, which actually is about what business are we actually in. Because I think one of the fascinating things for all of us, whether we're in a corporate legal department, a law firm, or a vendor, I think it's an interesting debate about what business are we actually in, given the way the value chain is changing dramatically. And I think it's interesting, again, picks up on the points made at the outset, about one of the problems is there's so much choice now. Actually, lawyers like to get things, because it's your core point, they like to get things right. They're trained to get things right, 100% right. And if you've got this choice, it's very difficult to make a choice and actually get on with things and make some mistakes and make things work. Marit?
Yeah, so it's one of the things we see when it comes to culture, and I might have a slightly different point of view coming from the Netherlands, where of course culture is slightly different here from the UK. One of the things we see is that the people that are coming into the law firms, people that are coming into the legal departments out of law school now, They want software and tooling. They want to have things that are just like Google, that are just like WhatsApp on their telephone. It needs to be easy, it needs to be super friendly, and preferably for free as well. That last part is a little bit difficult as a vendor because, well, there has to be a model, but maybe we even need to change ourselves. Maybe the licensing model is no longer the way of the future. Ask me again in 5 years, please. So what we see in the Netherlands is actually a change in education as well, change at the very basics, where there are now, in law school, there are classes in data management and in legal service design, or in legal design specifically. But an interesting thing, and recently I spoke to one of the chief researchers of the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam. And what they did is, everybody here knows what an MBA is. You do that while you're working, you get an MBA to take a step ahead. But they've actually created an MBA for lawyers specifically aimed at giving you the skill set that you aren't taught in law school, giving you the skill set to operate your legal department like a manager actually, to look at it and say, okay, I've got people, I've got processes, I've got software, how can I set this up in such a way to integrate it with the business? And to really teach them also what skills they might be missing and may need to get from outside or from elsewhere in the company to be able to run those projects successfully, because that's the trick in the end. As you said as well, people, especially lawyers, they get this perfect picture, zero risk, because of course, well, you don't want to have risk as a lawyer. So they take that picture and they try to implement that, and they just struggle over the insane hurdle that they need to take. Where if you really boil it down to the absolute essentials that you need, which is generally actually 80% of what you need, it's the 20% that they struggle with. If you manage to boil it down to that 80% and just take a first small step, and you can start small and then eventually get to that bigger picture.
And I think that fits in, Melanie, with the comments that you were making, particularly around leadership.
Right.
I mean, you've been on a 4-year journey,
Right.
And there will be some lessons which I'm sure everyone would love to hear in terms of how you got things right, what you got wrong, what you do differently. But also, could you comment on the leadership aspect of it, because it's fundamental to it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to the point, being very honest, it's critical, just to be very honest about what you're trying to accomplish. For me, I had gone through this journey 3 other times in 3 organizations, and so I learned very quickly that you start down a path and you sell something, people are, as we saw, 23% approval rating at one point, everybody was unhappy. So anything was better than where we are. But being really mindful about including people in the process. What I've noticed, and I'm not an attorney, what I've noticed with attorneys is, and I think one of the most difficult challenges in my job is to take attorney requirements and translate those into IT speak. And I used to chuckle. I previously worked at Qualcomm, and it was very frustrating. All they did was fight, and I would say, wait, you're both geniuses in your own way. Stop and listen to each other. Stop and understand. They interpret one way, you interpret another, but what are we trying to accomplish? Speaking to what I had said to leadership when I walked in the doors, like, I know what we need to do, but I'm not going to go down this path if you're going to waffle. I have 250 people to try to make happy. We're not going to make everybody happy. I think you have different mindsets. Some people they love to adapt new technology. They love the change. And you have others that say, no, I'm very comfortable and my stuff works and my very archaic docket report works and this works for me. And that's your bigger challenge. And I think, leadership for me had to come in and say, we defined a mission statement and we made very clear we were addressing the 80% and that we were going to have to evolve and that we're going to change everything, but we're going to learn from this. And we were sure to get everybody involved. So in the patent-specific group, there were 156 people, and 143 of them in somehow, some way, were involved in some work planning session, workflow design session, something. And that made people feel like, okay, I have a voice here. I can't begin to tell you how at Microsoft voices are encouraged. You're encouraged to argue and to challenge and to question, and that can make something like this very difficult. And what we also found to the educational aspect is, you have different, we call them the millennials, right? And millennials are, hey, technology, this is great, this is easy. I joke that my teenagers are more proficient in Microsoft technology than I am because that's what they're being taught at young ages. Law schools are employing these things now to help people evolve. But what about the people who've been working in the industry like I have for 30 years? And we're like, wait, we've been doing something this way for 20, 25 years. And that's where I think it's really important that leadership understand, yes, we want to change, but having the empathetic approach to say, we're going to help you get there. We're going to design programs that help you learn these skills. We're going to put them into your core priorities, and we're going to have these offerings so that you have the ability to learn. And I think that takes some of the angst and fear. You have attorneys, patent attorneys, and I chuckle. I've never seen people more resistant to technology than patent attorneys. And I go, there's an oxymoron there. But it's that fear of feeling like, wait, I don't know everything I'm doing. And I think we all have that as human beings. And so leadership has to be tough to say, this is where we're going, we're not going to waffle. But they also have to say, we are going to help you get here, and here's how, and make people feel good about that journey. Otherwise, user adoption tanks, and you got nowhere.
Okay, but let's just dig into that a bit further, because in that process, you've talked about consensus at one level because you've got everyone involved in the process. But there comes a point, doesn't there, where consensus is fine, you've got to make a decision and get on irrespective of having everyone's view. And you will get, I suspect, some passive resistance. So what did you do to deal with those things, and where did you draw the line? Because I think one of the things on any the conversation was making about implementations are driven as projects. They have to be driven, and there comes a point where consensus, I'm afraid, has to be moved from it because you've got leadership support to go over there. So what did you do to address passive resistance and draw the line on consensus?
Well, so first and foremost, when you come into Microsoft, you're not an attorney, you're in operations. They don't want to feel like you're telling them what they're going to do. So we established different working groups to address different problems. And within those working groups, we had someone in leadership who was the ultimate, if we couldn't come to a consensus or a majority, they would make that decision. I did form a project management organization within our department, and they were solely dedicated to true project management of this. And so we were very detailed and thorough in the documentation. One of my favorite sayings, Abraham Lincoln said this, if you fail to plan, plan to fail. And people massively underestimate the plan phase. My plan phase was 18 months. And it's digging into every single aspect and making sure that when you're making these decisions, you're answering some key questions. We identified up front, what are our key requirements? We must be able to extract the data that looks like this. We must be able to have high user adoption. We must be able to automate. And so every time we made decisions, we asked ourselves, are we sticking within our mission statement? We had a mission statement, and one of the key components was customizations over system configurations. Pardon the expression, but the expression I always used was we pimped our ride. And you get this great car, and then you put all this cool stuff on it, and it drives like garbage. And that's what we had done. So that was probably my biggest struggle, was to convince everyone, no, you don't need this to turn red when it's due in less than a week. Just look at the due date. Just use the system this way. And that, having leadership come in and help drive those ultimate decisions so that we weren't, and having leadership tell their people in there, we call them our connects or our performance reviews, this is a core priority for you. You must participate, you must help drive this. And then they were measured against that. And I think when people understand I'm being measured against how well I evolve, how well I do, they step up a little bit more.
Marit, in terms of projects that you've seen that have succeeded and those that have not succeeded, what makes the difference between the two?
Well, it's generally size of the project. I'm going to say this a couple times more, but the smaller the project, the easier it is to implement and to succeed. And you can even take a big picture project. At the scale that you're doing it is highly sophisticated, and getting extra help is an absolute must, but not everybody's in that position. A lot of legal departments, they simply don't have the funding or the space to get somebody, so they have to do it themselves.
True.
Well, first of all, I say take a quick evening course and learn some project management, because it's going to help you insanely. But even if you don't have time for that, if you take that big picture and manage to cut it up in 5 projects, don't make it one big project, cut it up in smaller projects. Start with your entity management or start with your contracts. Don't try to tackle everything today. And once you've done your first project with maybe 10 people involved and you've succeeded, learn from that project and reiterate. Go do your second project, but this time with 20 or 30 people. Mm-hmm. Take your teachings, ramp up slowly, and ultimately you'll get there.
Well, and I should clarify, we did our project in 10 phases.
See,
we did the same thing. We said, okay, we have patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, litigation, third party, acquisition.
If you get to 10, I'm going to be impressed.
So we got all 10. But we started with what's the big bang for the buck? What's going to bring an immediate, find the quick wins. I'm sorry to chime in, but find the quick wins. You sell a quick win, people go, oh, okay, this is
You're making my point for me, so I love
Cal,
this.
shut up. No.
But again, on both those things, for everybody in the room again, in all those cases, that's starting from a clear vision of what the target operating model is and working backwards.
Correct.
The worst, where we see projects fail is because they're tactical projects, not in the context of the organisation as a whole, or indeed the evolution of the function. So, we see a lot of legal functions that are desperately trying to avoid being the analogue outlier in a digital transformation, but they end up with tactical projects rather than actually what are we trying to achieve overall. So, Zev, is your view you've got to start from the big picture and work backwards? What are we actually trying to achieve? And then order the tactical projects accordingly in terms of early wins and returns on investment?
Yes.
Perfect. That was a great answer. Those are the answers that actually get us to the next question immediately. I think what's intriguing is where you touched on culture. We've got a vision of the organisation of the future in terms of corporate legal department. It's not an island. Does everyone accept? Put your hands up. Does everyone agree that legal's not an island? It's part of the end-to-end business process. It's part of the organisation. Okay. Now, in practice, how many of that actually? In how many cases is that actually the case in your organisation, though? In practice, put your hands up. Yeah, there's the disconnect, and it's really quite interesting. So a lot of this comes down to the cultural issues. We've got the big picture. We know there's some cultural challenges, and I think what's interesting is that although every organisation is different in terms of its size of function, the regulatory environment, the competitive environments there are some remarkably common themes between corporate legal departments. They're all under the same pressure: exponential growth in demand, difficulty in recruiting and retaining the right talent because it's changing dramatically, needing to do more with less. But there are some very, very common themes. And at the heart of it, I think it gets to, can we make sure the right work is done by the right people in the right place at the right price? Whether that's done internally or externally with technology, it's a complete continuum. But if you're going to take that transition, we're asking lawyers to jump, right? What's the role of the corporate lawyer in a corporate legal department of the future? And I'm going to come to you first, Melanie, because you've had to articulate that if you're asking me to change on this 4-year journey, I better have a good view about where I'm going to go and actually what my role in this is, and actually I can feel comfortable about that and I can adjust to it. So what do you do in that area?
Well, we actually did have to tackle that exact problem. Because our systems were so disjointed, I think our lawyers spent most of the time just digging and finding data and trying to answer questions and not really investing so much in the portfolio and not necessarily investing so much in the other business relationships. We simply just couldn't. We could only get to 30 or 40% of all the work that was coming in. We were on autopilot for the other 60%. And so, we really talked as a leadership team about what we need our lawyers to do is to be able to get to data to help drive better decisions. And those decisions help our business units. When a business unit wants to know how much coverage do we have on Xbox and whatever it might be, being able to answer those questions quickly, being more of a consultant attorney versus a tactical, task-driven attorney. And that's what we've really seen. Our attorneys spend a lot less time in the system, and they spend more time being able to look at the information and then really serving as consultants to our practice services group. And so I think, the lawyer of the future is even more intelligent. I think they're focused less on task-based type of work, and they're focused more on really understanding all that big data, that bacon, and making sense of it and helping the business overall drive better decisions, better financial decisions, better technology decisions, understanding the marketplace better. So years ago, my boss told me, please go be a lawyer. I said, no, thanks. I don't want to do that. If he told me that today, I would love it. Because that combination of the technology and understanding how these things can actually help you. They don't hurt you. They let you focus on more impactful work. And then understanding all the implications around that technology, I think it's fascinating. And so I think the value is it's the ability to consult and help drive the business forward and then understand all the potholes and the constantly changing legal issues that you also have to address to keep a company out of trouble.
Well, and I think this is the fascinating thing, isn't it? Actually, this is a great time to be a corporate lawyer in a corporate legal department. You've got more choice, you're moving up the value curve to actually become more strategic in terms of the relationship with the business. The low and medium complexity work is either being outsourced or automated out. So I think it's a great time to be there. So Zev, in terms of technology supporting the lawyer, what is your experience in terms of what you're seeing from customers you interact with and functions you interact with in terms of how lawyers will be using tech to actually go to that future state?
To get rid of the day-to-day mundane stuff. So the one thing I think the profession sits on is the relationship. I mean, this is what holds this profession together. Everyone, and there is something noble about this. And it's people come out of university, and that's the one thing that doesn't change, and it never. And I think it will never change, because the trusted advisor will remain a trusted advisor. He will always call your lawyer for their wisdom, not just the expertise, for someone you can trust to tell you what to do, and that will remain. Everything else, the day-to-day mundane, boring stuff will go away, and will be fully automated. And the future corporate lawyer or the future private practice lawyer, I see no difference. I mean, it'll be the same thing. So so it's a thinking job fundamentally, and it will remain a thinking job. It'll be more of a thinking job.
It's really interesting. There's one customer we're working with at the moment where their entire function, big global function, provides a concierge service to its business and all its business users. And they're very keen to retain it because it's the relationship and the way they do things. And we've had to have a very interesting conversation about concierge service is great if you're doing these big ticket items, but an NDA? Do you really want a concierge service when you're delivering an NDA, for heaven's sake? So what's fascinating is actually finding where they can play that role, where they're adding that strategic value. Maurits, what's your experience been?
Well, there's another aspect of the legal work, I think, and that's the sheer amount of data that corporate lawyers are sitting on today. They're sitting on a mountain of correct entity names, all the information around it, hopefully, yeah. I mean, I've seen plenty of our own contracts that just say Wolters Kluwer and no BV or anything behind it.
We can help you on that if you want some help, by the way.
No, we're working on it. I have a tool for that. But at the end of the day, they're not really doing anything with that information. They're not leveraging that. And I think the corporate lawyer of the future is going to become more and more sort of a data analyst, a person that's sitting on top of a mountain of highly accurate, highly important data and providing that to the rest of the business as a service. To basically passively be mitigating the risks within the organization by making sure that everybody is using correct, legally accurate data all the time. And that's a bit of a change. And of course, it won't be a huge part of his job, because by automating as much as possible, by having tools to let the business automatically create an NDA, for example, and automating other processes with your external firms to make it simpler and easier. It might only be 10% of your time that you spend on that, but making sure those processes are in place and making sure that's accurate is a step that needs to be taken, and it's a scary step. And to be honest, and we saw this with GDPR as well, if the corporate legal department doesn't dare take the step, another department's going to do it. Compliance is going to swing in from the left and say, yeah, we'll take care of it, and the role of the corporate lawyer will become smaller. So in a way, it's also an adoption that needs to take place in order for the function to grow and survive.
Okay, I think this is probably gets key. I think fascinating in all the debates, all roads ultimately lead to the data, and turning that legal data into business insight, so it's actionable for the business. I mean, so a very quick question. How many of you think that legal could be one of the best forecasters of sales in any organisation? How many people think that legal could be one of the best forecasters of sales in any organisation? And of course it can be, because if you think about contract lifecycle management, and if you've got appropriate case statuses which are automatically being generated as you're negotiating contracts, and assume there are 15 case statuses in that process, and you know at case status 10, which actually is awaiting internal approval, and going all the way through to case status 15, it's signed contract in the repository, you know after a while that at case status 10, 73% of contracts close in the next 3 months. And you've got the contract, you've got the customer, you've got the data, you've got the price, you've got the... You can easily, legal, doing what it does every day of the week, can add huge value into the business. So, accuracy of data. You made the point, Melanie, in your presentation. You inherited a really difficult data scenario. Yes. And you don't generate confidence unless the data becomes accurate. So I'm sure, I saw some smiles, by the way, when you said it was mainly based on Excel, because I saw some smiles in the audience about, yeah, because that's what we do. We're all based on Excel. Great tool, by the way. But what did you do to actually, what are the early things that people can go away from today and do to get their data to be accurate? What should they start doing?
Well, I think like anything, it's a prioritization. So, take patent data, for example. Looking at the key bibliographic data that could harm us. Bad expiration dates, your patent term adjustment isn't calculated correctly, your status is wrong. You have a wrong filing date, so your annuity is wrong, and that can cost significant money to a company to lose a very valuable patent. And so we really focused on just the key pieces of data that could harm us the most. And so just first looking at expiration dates and patent terms and filing dates and just making sure that the critical data was there, it actually paid for the project. We found $5.8 million worth of third U.S. and international patent maintenance fees we would have paid because we had the wrong expiration dates. The patents actually would have expired before that annuity would be due. So I was lucky in that at first I said I need a couple $1 million to pull this off, and then I went, never mind, I found 5.8. But if you think about it, it's not just the data in your system, it's also think about AI. I go back to AI, I hear everyone talking about AI. How do you plug in AI? You can't train an AI model with bad data. I mean, data is really at the heart of everything. And so you can't attack it all at once. First, we started with expiration, filing date, 3 or 4 key fields. We saw how bad that was. We did a next drill down into entities. I can say that every single one of our patents, we know what entity it resides in, and we were able to go fix that. It cost us several $1 million to record all over the world, but then that has now fueled our licensing business. We started getting very aggressive in our licensing business, and had we not corrected the data, our LG licensing negotiations would have been a disaster, because that's critical to a licensing agreement, your expiration dates, the title, and all of that. So I would just say prioritize what can hurt you the most, what can cost you the most money, or where can you maybe find money if you fix a set of data. And then again, prioritize in chunks.
So don't boil the ocean, focus on the things which create most value. And
Correct.
I think this is going to fit in, Maris and Zev, to the comments I'd like you to reflect on quickly, then we'll go to questions. Is effectively your case there wasn't a legal business case, it was a business case. Because
Yes.
actually, we see a lot of organisations struggling to make a legal business case for the adoption of technology. So where do you see organisations make a business case, an end-to-end business case rather than a legal case, and what has worked with organisations in terms of making that business case? In what particular areas? You referenced entity management as one area.
Yeah. So one thing I can advise everybody to do is to steal her example, because it's amazing. No, but it speaks for itself. You can show that to a CFO, and you can say, all right, so this project is going to cost this amount of money, but I expect, based on examples from other companies that have done this before me, to find 5 contracts that I can terminate, for example, which will give me back this amount of money. There's numbers out there for this, and we've seen this over and over with our customers. As soon as they migrate from, and you've done this as well, you migrated from several systems into one. So you get a more holistic view. You see, okay, what are the gaps, what's missing? And that instantly pays back for itself.
Yeah.
Now, this is hard to prove. There are other things you can look at. For example, okay, an average contract now takes 3 months to go from first draft to signature. Maybe by implementing a simple tool for drafting, I can turn it into a month. And then you're just talking to your CFO about quote to cash.
Exactly right.
That they understand. So as soon as you manage to turn what you're doing with your corporate legal department into a financial picture, into money, then you can convince your CFO of just about anything.
Make a business case, not a legal case.
Yeah.
Zev?
Well, very easy to prove in our case. One of our most typical ways we get into an organization is that we say, just let us look at the next quarterly IP actions that you have and produce a benchmark report of pricing for what it would cost on a market average value to action them.
So you help potential customers make the business case.
And we help them make the business case, and it would almost always show that companies are paying above average because they've been paying the same entity for the last 25 or 30 years, and prices have gone up, and then sometimes we learn that the data is very useful for people, and sometimes we learn frustratingly that people don't want to know. They go like, oh.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think so there are some very simple things. We've seen it with customers where just by enforcing annual inflation increases in contracts, they've paid for the entire projects because they never knew where the inflation clauses were in the contracts. Renewal dates in terms of renewal of contracts, so things like that are very easy, but they're business cases, not legal cases. We've got a couple of minutes for questions before I thank the panel on everyone's behalf. So has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask the panel? Yes, over here. I think there's a microphone coming to you. Excellent. And if you could say who you are and where you're from, please.
Sure. So my name is George Britton. I'm from Aperio. We help in-house legal teams gain clarity and control over their external legal spend. I thought the panel was really exciting and really lively. Thank you for that discussion. I have a question specifically for Melanie. So it seems like you're in quite a fortunate position in that you have, like, obviously a big technology team in-house and products in-house that you can draw upon. I think I have two parts of my question. So how do you know when to insource versus outsource? Mm-hmm. And what advice would you have to people who don't necessarily have the same technology teams in-house to make those kind of decisions?
So yeah, actually I would correct you slightly. We don't have a big in-house team. I do use vendors. One of the challenges I had I didn't get a lot of love from our IT department when what I was doing was cutting their costs 70%. So I didn't get a lot of support there. I set up a project management team within my own of a couple of people. I brought in one very senior person from Qualcomm that I had worked with and I knew really understood project management. But we did employ consultants. We used Duff & Phelps. They had a special niche team in IP that I had worked with for years. And that was valuable as well. Again, every culture is different. Microsoft culture being very strong. It was actually helpful for me to bring in a third-party consultant to say, you message this. I was viewed as the change agent. I was the jerk coming in to, change everything, bad me, bad me. And so it was helpful to have somebody neutral sometimes in the beginning, in the planning phases, facilitate the meeting discussions. That way I have a strong personality, as I'm sure you can guess already, and so some people don't. They want to feel comfortable, they want to feel safe. So that was really helpful. I ended up using 4 people from Duff & Phelps for a few years to really help us with the UAT, writing our test scripts, all those things that really bog you down that, again, that's not something I can employ full time. So I think you have to look at what do you have. Every organization's different. It's amazing at Microsoft I can hire a consultant like that, but to get a full-time headcount, it's a miracle. Whereas at Qualcomm, it was the opposite. I could get full-time headcount anytime. So I think you have to look at your organization, your limitations there, and then ask yourself, and even for me, the gentleman I brought in for my project management group, I said, I need you for about 4 years, and then I'll help you find the next thing. I don't need it forever. So you have to think about your resources and do you need these people very long term? Maybe you need a couple. If you're going to employ some significant changes, you're going to need ongoing expertise and knowledge around that, but you don't need 10 people. So I am a big proponent of vendors. I outsource most of our legal, paralegal, administrative work to a team in India, and I did use consultants for this. They were also very helpful in contract negotiations. CPA Global is our vendor. We have a very strong partnership, and I don't want to jeopardize that partnership, but I am a bit of a hard you-know-what when it comes to those discussions. So I was able to funnel that through my consultant. They can hate him, but they don't hate me. So like I said, I think you just have to understand your organizational limits of what can you do with resourcing, and you don't need people forever. This changes, like I said, it's 3-4 years, and I have 2 people now that I'm helping find other positions because they came, they saw, they conquered, and now it's on to the next thing. So, and there's plenty of vendors that do these things. Project management, to me, is grossly underestimated.
Yeah.
And in legal organizations, I don't know why lawyers seem to have a problem with project management. I had to sell the concept of project management. I said, this is just organization. This is keeping everything together. It's connecting dots. And so however you do that, that is a very critical function to the whole thing. That's who can serve the information up. That's what can help leadership drive decisions. And when people come back and go, why did we do that? It's right here. Here's who made the decision. Here was what we discussed. And we put all of our materials, we made it transparent to the whole department. Every single piece of project documentation was up there. And we had some people go, who made this decision? Why did they do this? But we captured what things were discussed, what did we consider, who was taught, and then they had people they could go talk to if they wanted to debate that. And again, that was that inclusivity. So I hope that answered your question.
And you timed that perfectly. Because one of my tasks is to make sure that we hit time, and we've got 20 seconds left. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's been a fantastic panel. There are lots of key messages there, right from start from your target operating model and work backwards, get appropriate leadership support, make sure you communicate and get people on side, but make decisions, make things happen. Data is obviously critical to this, but make sure you focus on the things that are going to add most value and make a business case, not a legal function case, because you'll stand much more chance of success. So on behalf of all of you, could you please congratulate and thank our panel today.
Thank you.
I think you're my favorite moderator of all times.